Welcome in to an Inside Carolina Day After podcast. If it's Sunday morning, that means it's Buck Sanders, Jason Staples, and me. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. And guys, we were talking briefly just before we jumped on here live. When you play games like this, you don't really expect there to be a ton to talk about after the fact. But as Buck so succinctly said, there's plenty to talk about after this one. North Carolina wins 45-10 over North Carolina Central. Buck, I'll let you get your opening thoughts in, and then we shall dig into it.
Well, this game was a lot like watching a duck swim across a pond. It looked a little smooth on top, but North Carolina was paddling like hell underneath. Um, the the way they got to 45-10, if you were just scrolling through the scores, 45-10 would have been right on the money. But how they got there and what happened to get there is a different story.
Absolutely. Carolina scores, I believe, 28 points in the fourth quarter to make the margin that. Jason, your opening thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pluck all the feathers off that bird that's paddling so hard so early, but I think we did find out a lot more about the about this team in this game, and some of it was good, some of it I think shows a good bit of promise for the rest of the year, and some of it, we saw some of the limitations of this team as well. So, every week you learn more about that year's team, and I think we got a good sense of some of the things that we thought. You and I earlier this year, Tommy, thought that some of these developments might happen. We weren't sure they'd happen by week 3, but we'd talked about some of this before, but we'll get into that as we go along.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and start with the big one. Jacolby Criswell comes in and sort of, at least in my eyes, and Buck, I'll let you be the voice of reason here. I think that Jacolby Criswell's the starting quarterback now. I'm not 100% sure it totally matters, but I think he did enough yesterday to get there. Granted, it was Central. But just from a look test, and this is where Jason can tell us if we're both right or wrong. From a look test, I saw a guy that appeared comfortable on the field from the get-go. And Connor Harrell, as good a kid as he is, as good as abilities as he has, he's just not there yet for whatever reason. And we can psychoanalyze that forever. But Criswell just looked the guy, looked the part much more than Harrell did, I thought, on Saturday, Buck.
Well, Jason has always counseled us about how uh, difficult it is, more so than it appears, to be good at throwing the ball short. And Connor Harrell's not very good at that, at throwing the ball, inside that first 10-yard line or even behind the line of scrimmage line. But Criswell identified open guys in that area and hit them without thinking about it. He just saw them flash open and without another thought just flicked the ball to them and moved on. And we've always said that this particular UNC football team is going to have to be a move the chains kind of team, a team that you know gets the ball down the field, not necessarily always in big chunks, but can get the first down and move on and live to fight another day on the next set of downs. So I think Criswell was very good at that, and you saw that in bowl relief when he was throwing the ball to John Copenhaver, who had 6 catches in this game. And Copenhaver would just be in the middle area of that field and like on a shallow cross or some other short area uh, pass reception, and he'd flash and Criswell would zip him the ball. He has some things to work on for sure, and he's not Drake May. Let's not get too far out of our skis here, but one of the things he's going to have to work on is deep ball, throwing a deep ball. Harrell may be a better deep ball thrower, but um, you know that's something definitely Criswell could work on. It seems to me like he's trying to zip the ball 70 yards instead of trying to drop it in a bucket. So there's some things that Criswell doesn't do as well, but he also showed, if he gets a lot of pressure, he's not going to sit there and take a sack. He'll flick the ball out of bounds. All those are good quality things about a quarterback you want and you'd like to see for a team like North Carolina is, which is predominantly a running team. The passer, it just has to do enough to move the chains when you get in that 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 situation. And so far, I like what I saw against Criswell. Keep in mind the level of competition was not something that's going to bring out the worst of what you can see from a quarterback. So with those caveats, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, they were both playing against the same Central team there, so we can at least compare and contrast within this game. But to your point there, Jason, I want to talk a little bit about Jacolby Criswell here. He admitted and talked in the post-game press conference that he was too heavy. It was an interesting discussion as to maybe why that was the case, but he has worked. I wish I could lose 15 pounds in however many weeks or months he's been able to do it.
He lost him in about 4 weeks.
I know.
Tommy, you don't need to lose more weight, buddy.
Well, I need to pack on the muscle, so maybe we'll go the opposite way. But it shows me that he is doing everything he can to get ready to play in this offense, and that was not the case when we saw them in late July, early August, and so credit him for that. But Jason, what did you see from him on the field? I saw a couple times where it looked like he wanted to panic maybe, and he ducked in like he was going to just shoot the gap, and then he made a throw. But from your eyes, you watch these guys all the time, and you've watched plenty of quarterbacks. I just thought he looked, paired with what North Carolina has in the running game, looks like by far the best option that they've had this far this season.
Well, I mean, I think you do have to consider level of play in terms of level of opponent, but you did see both guys out there against that level of opponent, and I do think even in his first drive out there, though he wasn't asked to do a whole lot, the thing that stood out to me was just the general poise and level of comfort on the field, and making decisions or whatever was. He looked more comfortable and more poised than either of the other two had looked all season. And the other thing is that when he did have to do certain things and make certain throws, he consistently made his layups. He made his layups, hit a few mid-range jumpers. He just didn't hit anything from deep. And at the same point, you know the guy can make those shots from deep. He's just not quite there. I still, as a thrower, it's interesting because we've known the arm talent that he's had since he stepped on campus, but it seemed to me when we watched him in fall practice, and we went into fall practice, and I was saying, look, based on what I've seen of these guys, I mean, we could show people the text messages between us all, where I said in July or so, after I'd gone through all the scouting report stuff, saying it's hard to, he may not get the chance because it's really hard to come into a new offense in the fall, but Jacolby might be the best. I think Jacolby's the best of the three quarterbacks that they've got on this roster. And all things being equal, if he'd been here from the spring, he's probably the starter. That's what I thought coming into August. And then we saw him in person in practice, and he'd gained that weight which he was pulling off, and also just in terms of arm, he's still knocking some rust off. He's not throwing quite as well as he has in the past. So that's the other thing, is we know he can actually make some of the throws that he's missing right now. That as he gets more into rhythm and all of that, some of that's gonna emerge a little bit better. He's never had the greatest touch in the world on some of the bucket throws and all that, but he can make those throws. But to me, it really was all about the management of his surroundings, the calm that he played with in terms of the overall offense, and just the speed and tempo with which he played. And there's something about this. I mean, everybody who's coached offensive football knows how this works, and there's almost a mystical quality to it, where the offense takes on the persona of the quarterback to some degree. That even if the guy's just handing the ball off, even if some quarterbacks just move the offense better. You put two guys out there, both guys can make the same throws, but one guy brings a calm and directs the offense and manages things better than the other. And I thought Jacolby yesterday, first couple drives he came out, he settled the offense down. Just in a calm sense, in a poised sense, and getting them into a certain rhythm, and getting them into the right checks and all that. And look, Harrell gets people into the right, it gets them into the right checks generally as well. But it was just that kind of calm of, all right, guys, let's just finish this. That was, I thought, palpable in his initial appearance, which is why I think they left him out there after that for a while.
Yeah, and it paid off for North Carolina. Like I said earlier, I just think Harrell, for whatever reason, is still working on that aspect of the game. And I agree with you, Jason. That's a big part of it, is because, everybody has a person that you talk to and sort of calms the noise in your life or whatever. I think Criswell's that guy for this offense at the moment. Who knows what it'll be, but Carolina plays JMU next week. The competition will get a little bit tougher. We'll talk about the defense on the other side of the break. I see a lot of people wanting to talk about that. The stats may not back up your assertions in the live chat, but we'll get there. But Buck, another thing, we don't need to talk about Omarion Hampton. I mean, 25 carries against North Carolina Central.
Too many.
Way too many.
Too many. And like Jason was talking about on the game plan podcast, 5 would have been plenty. And it's not like they don't have anybody they can put in his place. Maybe not anybody nearly as good as Hampton, but that's every other running back in the United States, in my opinion. But those guys need snaps too. Get Goss and French in the game, let them play, see what they can do. The only thing I'm thinking is the North Carolina staff looked at each other and said, hey, maybe if we don't run Hampton's legs off, we don't win this game. But at a certain point, they had a substantial lead, and they could have backed off a lot sooner than they did. So maybe 5 might have been too few in this game, but 10 was too many in my opinion, and 25 was outrageous.
Yeah, that's the thing. And he took some hits there, and he doesn't play gingerly when you watch Omarion play even late. He had 25 for 210 with a long of 53. Jason, you want to get in on that? I think Charleston French looked good. I think Davion Gauss looked good. Barlow needs to get healthy, but I think North Carolina's got enough running backs to sort of take some of the load off Hampton. For whatever reason, it didn't happen against Central.
I said what I said. I said what I would say now in the game plan podcast. I didn't want to see more than 12, 15 carries from him. But you also, there is the thing of you play to win the game, and this game was within a score going into the fourth quarter. So at a certain point, I'm pretty sure the coaching staff would have really loved to have him carry it 10 times, but they also wanted to be up 28 at the end of the first half, and they weren't. So, it's one of those things. As a coach, I've told guys in the past, you earn your way off the field in those kind of games. You gotta execute well enough to score enough points to give those guys over there more opportunities and get yourself some rest. And the offense and defense did not do that. They didn't execute. You mentioned. I don't know if we actually already mentioned, but we were planning on mentioning all the penalties.
Yes.
And there were a lot of reasons. This was a sloppy football game, and there were a lot of reasons that they didn't run and hide on the scoreboard early, and that's why he kept staying out there. They weren't going to take him out and put him on ice until they had a multi-lead score, and it didn't get there.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons. Great comment by Preston in the chat. It's tough to not drive your Maserati if you have one. I don't have to worry about that. but I'd probably drive it all the time with top down in the rain if I had one. Let's switch over another part of the offense that I think is interesting to watch. First, Buck, you love the tight ends. You mentioned Copenhaver. He and Nesbitt combined for nine receptions, and that's a part of the offense that I've been waiting to see is use this tight end room because they're really good. But on the flip side of that, Buck, the vets in the receiving room are not getting it done, in my opinion. And the young guys are ready to take their spots.
Yeah, there's no argument about that, really, Tommy. If you look at it, you know, J.J. Jones was targeted 4 times and had 1 catch for 6 yards. And he's like the most veteran receiver we have in terms of playing time on the field and so on and so forth. Nate McCollum only had 2 catches. Kobe Paysour and Gavin Blackwell, they were non-factors in this game, although I think Paysour may be battling a little bit of an injury of some kind. But, it's time to see these guys, and we saw them in this game, and I don't think that's the end of us seeing them. I thought Christian Hamilton played a hell of a game. He only had the 1 catch, but it was a really nice catch. And he went after that fumbled punt return like a badger. I mean, he was all over it trying to get that ball. So, we love to see that, right, Jason? We love to see that dog in them come out, right? Hamilton, Phillips, Taylor, those guys, Ship, they need more run, and they should get more run because if they're the more talented player, I apologize that the more senior guy is not playing as well as younger guys, but we have to play our best players, the guys that are getting done on the field. So I would look for those younger guys to be bigger contributors as we head down the season.
Jason, to that point, and I want your take here, but is there any value to the thought that Criswell and to an extent Connor Harrell had worked with the younger guys more in the offseason, in the camp, and all that, and that's why there's more chemistry there? Or is that just an excuse for maybe why the older guys aren't getting as much run or having much success with the different quarterbacks?
Well, I mean, I think I was the first person to mention that to begin with. When we started talking about Harrell and what you might see with him is a little bit more comfort with some of the young guys because those are the guys that he worked with primarily in 7-on-7 situations and all that in practice at different points. And to some extent, that's true with Jacolby. Now, the interesting thing with Jacolby is Jacolby also has multiple years of experience with some of the older guys because he was on campus in another offense with those guys. So you think about, J.J. Jones and Paysour and some of those guys were with Jacolby, and they were actually running 2s with Jacolby when he was last on campus. And actually, I think Copenhaver and Nesbitt, you could see the comfort level there between them and Jacolby in those connections at different points. That was definitely there. But so I do think that some of that is a factor right now. But I think the other factor is, and we talked about this in the offseason, the young guys are just a lot more talented than the older guys. And so, at a certain point, when you've got bigger, faster, stronger athletes, that is helpful at that position. The problem is that those young guys still have not gotten all the, the little things down about the position to create the space and to do some of the stuff that the older guys know how to do. And so it's still going to be a little bit of time before they're fully ready to take over. But I do think you're going to start to see over the course of the season, depending on which of those young guys sort of start to separate themselves in that respect. Once they catch up in those areas, then they'll start taking reps. And you could see a couple of those guys already, Hamilton being the most obvious one. He seems to have taken sort of the next step or half step to be really in that mix. And then, he's kind of followed behind that by Billups is kind of the next on that list. And then probably Ship and Alex Taylor would be the next two after that. But, there's a lot of young talent in that group. And, frankly, we've talked about this. The older guys, you've got some nice players, but you don't have any number one receiver. You got, you're going to have to figure out what those guys can do for you with the quarterback and running game mix that you have. And if you are going to be a very run-heavy team, the other thing that you have to look at is who's doing the best job blocking downfield, right? We may say J.J. Jones had a kind of indifferent game as a wide receiver, didn't create a whole lot of separation or whatever, one catch on 4 targets, all of that. But the question is, did he block his correct guy well on each play if you're turning and handing it to Omarion Hampton? And how many times does the back get an extra 10, 12 yards because the receivers are doing their jobs blocking? Those are the little things that when you're assessing who's playing, that matters. So again, and older guys tend to do those things better at this point. But the younger guys are starting to figure it out. And the more those younger guys figure out, the more I think we're going to see them on the field.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I will never forget watching a guy like Hakeem Nicks and Brandon Tate and those guys who were great receivers, but they blocked their ass off. That allowed a lot of runs to go from a 5 or 6 yard run to maybe a 10 or 12 or 50 yard run. And so we don't need to lose sight of that fact of guys getting it done in that area as wide receiver. I remember Lonnie Gallo says, if you're not going to block, you're not going to play. And that has a lot to do with what's going on as well. We're talking with Buck Sanders, Jason Staples on the day after. Buck, I want to stay on the offensive line. I'm kind of going back and forth between you guys. And I want to see what we think about how the offensive line's played. Blasky out again, Banfield dinged up as well. It's tough to be critical of the offensive line at all when you have 330 yards rushing and 8 yards a carry. I don't care who the competition is. But what'd you see from that side of it? It's tough when we do this. We don't really get a chance to break down the film before we were recording this show. But I thought the offensive line did enough. And then Hampton runs through almost 1,200 yards after contact last year. And he's on that pace again this year, it looks like. What'd you see, Buck?
Well, I thought the offensive line did what they needed to do in this game. I didn't think they were the story in this game at all. Being down 2 starters, looking at it in the light that the coaching staff, Randy Clements and Chip Lindsey, thought that the 2 guys that are sitting out now on kind of injury were the better players at the start of the year. So looking at it from that angle, they were down 2 of their best offensive linemen, and so they had to compensate for that as best they could. I think probably the left guard situation is maybe the more problematic one because I think they really need Banfield in the game because at left guard he's just a difference maker in my opinion. He's somebody that can make a difference in a game on the offensive line. So I'd like to get Banfield back. Love to have Blasky back, but other than that, I think they did what they needed to do in this game.
Jason, your thoughts here. This has been a big point of contention watching this team. And, at some point you can't rely on Omarion Hampton breaking every single tackle every single time. What'd you see from the OL yesterday?
It's hard to grade how an offensive line looks against that level of competition. There was more leakage than you want to see against that level of competition. But, I think your backup center looks fine. I do think that there's a drop off between those first guys and who they had on there. But, the good thing is I think Banfield will be back soonish. I'm not sure about Blasky based on what that looked like when he got rolled up on. But, Yeah, I mean, I would just give him a big incomplete right now. And my sense is that, especially if they have to roll with the guys that they had out there in this game, it's going to become an issue against the better defensive lines that they're going to play. I do think Greenberg can continue to grow. He's taken a big step up, and the moment's not been too big for him. That's really a good sign. But they got a ways to go there to gel as a unit. And again, remember, they were coming in with 4 new starters to begin with this year. So, there's still a lot of room for growth. But again, 3-0, you're fine. You're expected, if you run the ball like that, if you run the ball that many times against this level of opponent, you should go over 200 yards. They did. They mostly took care of their business. So, that's good.
Are we concerned about the offensive penalties, Jason? You had delay of game, whatever, legal formation, false start, ineligible downfield twice. Is that, I mean, against a team like Central, that it doesn't need to happen anyway, but it definitely doesn't need to happen on a game like Saturday. That's got to be concerning, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a testament to focus and, a combination of focus and also not being lined up next to guys that you're used to being lined up next to the whole time. That's again something that offensive lines get used to each other, and the communication and everything that happens gets really natural, and those guys settle in, and you start to get fewer penalties as a result. I think this group it still has to settle in. They're young, and they have to learn how to bring that focus day in, day out, regardless of who's next to them, and they still have a ways to go there.
Yeah, that is a key takeaway. Was North Carolina focused and ready to play fully? We'll talk about the defense in just a second, but it's Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Jason, we've talked about we need Johnny T-Shirt to hook us up on some swag for our shows and have different shows. This shirt was once a Johnny T-Shirt product, and we need to get back to that. So Johnny T-Shirt, if you're listening, we need swag for the shows, but they've got great customer service no matter what you need, Carolina related, Carolina gear related. They're online, they're in person. Look, it rained a ton on Friday. It was beautiful in Chapel Hill on Saturday. Would have been a great time to walk up to Johnny T-Shirt, check out their gear in person. But if you can't get there, go online. Tell them Inside Carolina sent you. Premium subscribers not only get Bucks 4 times a week column during the season as a premium subscriber, you get 10% off your orders at JTS. National guys pay the bills. It's the day after Carolina beat Central 45-10. Okay, we want to come back in, and I'm going to stay on a negative right now, the penalties. But North Carolina had 11 accepted defensive penalties. Accepted but unacceptable. Again, focus or a bigger issue. Mack has harped on penalties, especially pre-snap penalties, forever at North Carolina. They had them repeatedly Saturday, but what do you think?
Well, it was a lot of penalties called on both sides. Actually, it wasn't just all UNC getting penalized, so I don't think we can proclaim any bias there. And I didn't see too many questionable calls. The one personal foul on Dez for hitting the quarterback, that was a little bit.
That was bad. That was bad.
But regardless, certainly there are penalties that are worse than other penalties, and nobody likes false starts or offsides. Those kind of penalties are just unforced errors in most cases. But what I really don't like to see is when players allow themselves to get baited into losing their composure on the field. Those are the ones that trouble me the most. Marcus Allen taunting the central bench coming up the sideline after the goal line stand.
Oh, don't even get me started on that one, because that's the second time this year I've seen Marcus Allen taunting in a way that I would have been. I'm talking about that guy would have been running stadiums for a week for me if I were coaching. Well, because after the missed kick against Minnesota, if you go back and you watch that game, he's right there in the face of their kicker, taunting him after he missed that kick at the end of the game. And I'm sorry, I have no room for that stuff. And then in this one, did it again, and this time got nailed for it. And I'm telling you that is not acceptable from anybody.
I think the rest of the defense, especially the defensive line and the linebackers, ought to get him in a room and have a full and frank discussion on how terrible that is. They've just had a goal line stand. Central had the ball on the 1 yard line, and the defense virtually pushed them back ultimately to the 18-yard line, with them in a combination with their own dumb penalties. But the thing that troubles me about it more than anything is that, you can counsel a guy a few times, but if opponents know going into a game that you can be easily baited into losing your composure, you're become part of their game plan.
Again, this is
And
where
that's
I, as
not
a
something
coach,
you want. Yeah.
I, as a coach, was, I brought some petty to the table, and we would do that. We would identify, like, that guy you can go after a little bit, get him up, get him riled a little bit. I even did this as a player. It's like, I know that guy's got a temper. I'm going to block him just an extra second and see if he'll push me or whatever, and then I'm going down. It's that stuff. You should be doing this stuff. I mean, the pettiness that you've got to live with to be really successful in this is
really the staff and the players should stop talking about this and just get better. Do better. I know there's a lot of intense moments. It's very heightened. All your senses are very heightened, and your nerves are exposed. But if you're going to play this game at this level, you need to get past that and understand that I'm not going to allow myself to be baited into a situation that's going to hurt my team. And that's what the rest of the defense needs to discuss with Mr. Allen, who actually is playing better as far as being a player. He had a decent game against. They didn't like to throw at him at all. Of course, they didn't have anybody that could throw. Their quarterbacks just weren't very good in this game. So, but those loss of composure penalties are the ones that trouble me.
Yeah, me too. That really bugs me. Yeah, and I will say, Marcus Allen still did give up some space. I mean, actually, one of my old wide receivers from Durham, Jordan, played in this game. Joaquin Davis, the best receiver for Central, was one of my guys. And I was pleased to watch him get separation on multiple occasions. Now, they couldn't hit him. They didn't have the quarterback to get there, but you could see at different points Watt turning and saying, "Look, I had you, this sort of thing," to those DBs who were yapping back at him. But don't think you won just because the throw didn't get here. They still need to tighten up on that back end for sure compared to what their potential is, and there's a lot to clean up in terms of leverage and in terms of technique and making sure that they're not giving up space. Because better quarterback would have had a pretty decent day out there.
Yeah, I mean, and Caleb Koss got picked on again. That's going to be a reoccurring theme until he totally figures it out. But you saw the flash. I mean, the interception, the athletic ability on the interception was just ridiculous. I could certainly see him reaching over the wall in Boschheimer Stadium and taking a home run back after watching that play. But yeah, I agree with you guys a lot to get back. And I want to read a stat that John Bowman, Hat Tip producer John, sent me this morning. Through 3 games last year, North Carolina had 4 of the 5 ACC snap count leaders on defense. This year, the leader for North Carolina is 30th in the conference in snap counts. That being said, Buck, Elijah Huzzy, Marcus Allen, Power Eccles, and Amari Campbell, at least according to Football Focus, that best I can see, played every snap against North Carolina Central. what are we doing? What are we doing here? Ty Adams, nothing. Dooley, which is Tyrann Stewart, nothing in the secondary. And, of course, we've talked about the need for a third and fourth linebacker, but this is
Yeah,
starting to be one of those things that we've talked about multiple years now. Your
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. I get it. And the thing that makes this doubly troubling is that for good pieces of the game, they had somebody at quarterback who was a true freshman and who, on his high school team, probably ran the ball 80% of the time. I mean, was not a thrower of the football at all. Number 5, whoever he was, uh, but he played a significant part of the game after the Harris Walker, I guess his name was, went out, and he just was not a good thrower of the football. Yet they kept some of those secondary figures in, like Huzzy. Um, the thing about Huzzy, though, and we don't talk about him enough, is what an amazing player North Carolina got in that kid. I mean, he's open field tackler. He break up the pass. People aren't getting past him, so he needs a shout out. And I guess if you're the defensive secondary coach and you're looking at Huzzy out on the field, you're very reluctant to take him out of the game. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't, but I agree with what you're saying, Tommy, about the people that they left in the game should have gotten more rest. But I think we probably ought to talk a little bit more about Caleb Cost, because you hit dead on it that he got burned early on one of their longer pass plays, but he came back and made some plays, and he's a good open field tackler. He led UNC in tackles yesterday with 8. So he has the potential, and I think Mack Brown, he's not like the most informative person at a press conference, but he, he did bring up a good point in that the slot corner, the star, is more of a man player than most of the rest of the other secondary. So you've got to have tremendous coverage skills there. And he's the least experienced guy. They're going to pick on him more anyway. But in picking on him, they're making him stronger, I thought. And I thought he grew a little bit in this game. So, that's what you got to hope for. And you see some qualities that he has that are nice things to have. The open field tackling, and he's getting better. He's improving.
Yeah, I really like that guy. He's a pleasure to talk to, and like you said, he's getting better. Jason, back 7 defense. No, we talked about secondary a little bit. Let's talk about linebacker play and all, because I want to save the defensive line for the last portion of this show. But your thoughts here. I don't know if I saw a lot of busts. I did see some guys get beat. We've talked about that. Huzzy got beat on the inside slant there down near the goal line. That happens. Huzzy is proving his worth in spades, Jason. What about everybody else? Performance against a team like Central, who's got some skill guys that are decent. You mentioned your guy.
Yeah,
The other receiver,
and that happens to be the guy who beat Huzzy. He's my guy. I see you walk. Nice job. Too bad he doesn't have the quarterback to get him the ball in some of those situations. But no, I mean, I think the back 7 on the whole played pretty well. And in this game, you didn't hear a whole lot a whole lot of mention of the safeties, right? Mm-hmm. That's usually good, right? You don't want to hear a lot about your safeties. You don't want to hear, about a guy making a chase down tackle after, whatever. It means that they took care of business. And I think in general, they took care of business sort of front to back. I mean, the defensive line, for the most part, did a good job in this game. I thought Amari Campbell flashed more than once. I think his athleticism has really jumped out the first 3 weeks. He's got that club on, so he's hard to miss. But we kind of knew what Power Eccles was coming into the season. The real question was how well would they replace Cedric Gray? And at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, Cedric Gray, you take him in a heartbeat and put him back out there. I mean, that's an NFL guy. But Amari Campbell's handled himself well, and like I said, he's flashed more than once. He gets into the backfield when they ask him to blitz. He he takes care of business, and I'm impressed by the way that he has that he's just basically come in and handled things pretty seamlessly. He's run to the football, played inside out well. He plays sideline to sideline. You really like what you've got there. I'm still not impressed by the backup linebackers. They've still got a long way to go. The one offside penalty was, it's like, there's zero reason for that. You're not getting a whole lot of benefit by, you're mugging that A gap. You're going to, blitz there. You've got to hit it at the right time. But if anything, you got to err in the opposite direction, one step back rather than one step forward. And just a little over eagerness and some of those things with some of those younger guys that did come through. But on the whole, I mean, I think if I'm coaching defense in this game, I come out of this feeling like my group didn't play their best game, but that they're growing across the board. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, the stats bear out. Central had 75 yards on their first drive. They finished with 167. I think they had less than 50 in the second half. So the defense settled in there. There was some plays that made it look ugly. We talked about, Buck, you answered Jim Woodall in the chat, but Carolina gave up 3 explosive plays, one 10-yard run, a 34-yard pass that Cost got beat on there down the sidelines, the home sidelines, and then another one over the middle. But all in all, I thought they did well, and I'm going to flip it back and go with Jason here and kind of snake draft it back. The defensive line, I mean, it's not too often you have a 7-play goal line stand, and North Carolina had that. And in that goal line stand, Jason, I felt like watching them from afar, and then on this morning, is that finally somebody said blanket, and that's not a blanket, that is an expletive. They're not scoring here. And you saw Des Evans make a play, Travis Shaw. What'd you see from the young guys? Tyler Thompson graded out the best. Number 40 is putting in work with Kamen Rucker on the sidelines. But your thoughts?
I think the last 2 weeks is the best we've seen Shaw play in a North Carolina uniform. He actually has shown really good energy and has gotten after it in a way that he hadn't previously before this year. So that's a good thing. Ritzy continues to play with some burst, and Ritzy finally is playing like his hair's on fire, and you're starting to see the talent and the explosiveness that we all thought he had coming in out of high school. It's the first time we've really seen that and it keeps coming out. It keeps popping off the screen. Beyond that, I mean, most of these guys were, frankly, a lot better than the guys across from them in terms of just the level of athlete, the level of player. Now, I mean, I saw Wisdom Asaburo out there, so I mean, that's a former Carolina player on the offensive line, and they got him a couple times too. I mean, it's not that Central doesn't have good players on the offensive line. They're just a tier down from what you're going to see generally in the ACC, and a couple tiers down from good offensive lines like what Georgia Tech's going to bring to town, for example. But beyond that, I mean, they took care of business up front, and once they kind of settled into what NC Central was doing, you could see them just sort of impose their will up front, and it made things a lot more difficult. I mean, how many times did we see the quarterback? There may have been somebody with a little space on the back end, but the quarterback was throwing with somebody in his chest, and that's what you expect to see in this kind of game with this kind of matchup. And I thought Thompson, 40, I thought he played a really, really solid game, and again has earned some time. I would have liked to have seen 93 a little bit more in this game in terms of reps, and that's just a matter of my preference for getting some of these guys more opportunities to rotate. But when he was in there, I saw him, pop a couple times in terms of especially against the run, little bit of quickness there. So again, it's one of those things where you're learning what you have. The best thing that we've seen so far is that the defensive tackle group, I think, has taken a clear step forward from the last couple of years. And actually, maybe the best example of this is that goal line stand, because you remember was this 2 years ago? Florida A&M, when FAMU came into Kenan Stadium, and they had an opportunity from like the 3 or 4 yard line. You'll remember I did a film room session on this where they pushed the defensive line completely back into the end zone, and ran it down their throats in that goal line situation with no real problem. And FAM doesn't have as good an offensive line, or didn't that year have as good an offensive line as Central does this year. This year, Central tried to do the same thing and hit it right in the A gap, inside run. This is just gut drill. And Carolina did a good job of going big in terms of putting their bigger players out there, which hasn't always been the case, which is baffling to me.
No dime packages.
Right, exactly. They're not running dime on the goal line. So, good for that. They got their substitution patterns down. But, boy, that's a deep cut going all the way back to, what was that,
Yeah.
Conan?
A&M game.
In fairness, that was not this staff.
Yeah. But they were able not only to hold up there. This was from the 1 or 2 yard line, but they reestablished the offense, or they reestablished the line of scrimmage a yard deep in the backfield. I saw that and I went, wow, there really has been change, significant improvement on the defensive line. And the reason, and it's because my mind went back to playing against FAM, which is a comparable level of team, to say that versus this, you're looking at just playing with lower pad level, getting off the ball, getting into the pads of the offensive line, all of those things, and letting your technique win. That right there is a big deal. And, maybe the best thing so far we've seen from this season is that they've not gotten pushed around on the at the defensive tackle position.
Yeah. You want to talk, a lot of people in the chat saying, is this coaching, is that coaching, or whatever. That defensive line performance and getting these guys to play, that has
that's
to
coaching.
do with coaching. That is an example of coaching. Buck, your thoughts here? I mean, a couple things I saw. I saw Ritzy have another chase down tackle. This coming this way towards the home side, chase down a guy. I mean, you got to love seeing a defensive tackle chase somebody down. I saw Des Evans getting a bend around the edge and getting a solid hit on the quarterback. The roughing the passer call that he got was BS. I mean, I felt like I was watching line. I don't even want to go there. I don't do refs, but anyway, a lot of important plays by this defensive line. I think it bodes well for the future, not because of what they did against Central, but because of how they're playing and how they're attacking this is so different than we've seen in years past. And now we've seen it roughly 3 straight games here in this season.
Well, let's look at it like this. Through 3 games, North Carolina, drum roll please, is 7th in the nation in rushing yards per carry. In the nation, and in yards per game, they're 13th. I mean, now granted, and I talked to Tommy about this off the air, they haven't been lining up against the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills or anybody like that in these 3 games. The level of competition has not been what we would say a 2004 Bunning level. So you have to. They're not going to finish the season that high in the Russian stats, but against anybody. I mean, there was an expression back in the day that North Carolina couldn't stop a charging herd of toddlers in run defense. And fairly common, which that expression survived several seasons
That is Buck's go-to too. I've heard that one for years.
so
It's a
good.
great one. I would stop all the toddlers because I'd forearm shiver every one of them. Get it, Buck.
So the fact that they're seventh in the nation after 3 games, I don't care what the level of competition and yards per carry, rushing defense, is significant. And I think we have to keep reminding ourselves somewhat that the issues in the secondary and their success at stopping the run are part of playing complementary defense. They're trying to stop the run as their priority. That's what they want to do to every team they face. They want to limit them on the ground, and then they have to take their licks for that reason in the secondary, because they're going to put their guys in more dangerous situations as a pass defender than they would if they were playing a Gene Chizik, keep everything in front of you, keep your eyes on the quarterback at the entire time, that kind of stuff. So, that's the thing that I've seen from this defensive line and the linebackers. And talking about Amari Campbell, he made a couple of plays yesterday that I'm not sure Cedric Gray could have made. I mean, he is a very athletic guy, and that's going to allow him to make some plays at linebacker that are going to be beyond the capability of some other linebackers. So he really, really came on yesterday. Campbell and the defensive line and Power Eccles can hit, and you saw Stick Lane come down and make a few hits from the safety spot a few times. Those kinds of plays from the defense and their run defense in particular, if they're going to have a decent season this year, they have to follow that plan and make it work. Limit people on the ground and make sure they can't do the same to you. So the old stop the run, run the ball, run the damn ball. That's what we want to see from this UNC football team.
Buck Sanders will be selling autograph hats saying run the damn ball at your local Bowls Lot tailgate. Jason, let's get out of here. We can't do these under an hour. I mean, that's the thing. It's like we're contractually obligated to talk to you guys for an hour. It is interesting discussion about Cedric Gray. My thought is, do they miss him? But
yes.
We won't go. They miss him, but I don't know if it's shown up yet. It might, but that's another talk for maybe a later point. Carolina plays James Madison at noon. Get out your Bloody Marys and scrambled eggs for the tailgate. We'll be in the Bowls Lot from 9 to 11 on next Saturday with Joey Powell and Inside Carolina crew. Of course, a ton of content coming your way at Inside Carolina. Hold on, Jason. Your final thoughts are going to be sponsored by Congruity. CongruityHR.com. Email Matt@CongruityHR.com. Get your small to mid-sized business assessment. Great customer service, great technology, great everything that they were able to explode their business from a local business to a national business. They are local here in North Carolina, so they want to help North Carolina fans. And if you're watching this, shout out to the one Miami fan in the chat. Love it. But if you're a local North Carolina business, or if you're a national somewhere else in the world, call Matt at Congruity and get their assessment. Email him, Matt@CongruityHR.com. Get everything you need for your small to mid-sized business. Final thoughts here. Interesting question in the chat. Is BC the toughest team on the schedule now? That game's so far away. Who knows what the world will look like by late November, much less the football season. Jason, give me your final thoughts here on North Carolina Central, North Carolina, and then James Madison coming up. What needs to happen going forward?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question. No, I don't think so. I think Georgia Tech's actually a tougher team than Boston College in terms of, top to bottom. But in any case, BC is going to be a tougher out than they looked like they'd be at the beginning of the year. They've played organized and they're good up front. But to me, the biggest thing coming out of this game is that you have a better sense of what you are as a football team. And I do think you're likely going to see a lot more of Jacolby Criswell as the guy going forward. You know, he's an older player, and he also has a lot of talent, and you know, the game just appears to me to move more slowly for him at this stage of his career than it does for Harrell. And, you know, that's no shame on a guy who's in his third year versus a guy who's in his fifth year. You know, I think at this point, at least Criswell has given you enough that you need to kind of ride that out a little bit and see what he's going to have against better competition. But again, guy that made his layups, made his mid-range shots, and generally got the ball to the right people, got the right checks in, all of those things. That's really, really positive moving forward. And again, the defensive line has been solid even without Rucker, and that's very positive moving forward. You add Rucker to this mix, and it's going to be that much better. So, you know, 3-0 through 3 is exactly where you wanted to be, and you know, you've got the capacity to beat the next few teams on your schedule. I do think each of the ACC games on the schedule, except for certainly one, looks maybe a little tougher than it did at the beginning of the season. You know, I think Pitt has shown signs of life. Duke is kind of what we thought they'd be. Georgia Tech is going to be, I think, a good bit better than a lot of people thought they'd be coming in. So, you know, there's some meat left on that bone that they're going to have to deal with. But, you know, as far as what this team could be and what, you know, we thought they were coming into the season, I think so far there's more positives than negatives in terms of of what the capacity is. They just have to get healthy.
Room for growth for sure. Buck, any final thoughts? Because you always have to close us. And I said Jason had the final, but I realized who I'm talking to. So give me something.
I agree with what Jason had to say, and I'm not going to add a lot to that. But I do think it's important to realize that North Carolina has decided what their identity is going to be, offensively and defensively, what their identity is going to be, and they don't look like they're going to deviate from that plan. The level of opponent is going to step up the rest of the way out, although looking at some of the ACC outcomes over the last few weeks, you have to wonder, you know, what's going to hold up and who is going to hold up. So, yeah, that's where I would go with this. Is North Carolina needs to continue to adhere to the identity that they've chosen, and make sure they just fulfill that identity as best of their ability.
Perfect way to end it. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt Incongruity. Shout out to Buck Sanders and Jason Staples, and shout out to the nearly 500 folks that joined us on a Sunday morning live. What better way to get your Sunday started than joining the day after with this crowd?
Too bad we didn't have something to talk about.
I could not. I know. Just imagine if we had something to talk about. Jason, Buck, as always, appreciate it. Shout out to the fans in Inside Carolina. Stay tuned for all the content here at Inside Carolina. Jeremiah, Adam, Evan, and Sophie from the front lines. Taylor, Joey, everybody else knocking it out. We'll see you on Tuesday at 8 o'clock for On the Beat Live. It's not going to be called On the Beat. And we'll see you, I don't know, multiple times this week and hopefully in the Bulls lot on Saturday. Thanks, guys.